or I decided that we would go ahead and do a filming of me doing the entire project. So you have something to follow along, and hopefully I will be able to give you some tips and tricks as we go, so that you can work on this at home. So we're gonna do simple turtle today. Just a couple of things on your pattern that I wanted to point out. The abbreviations are nice because it'll tell you exactly what you need to know as far as how I've abbreviated things. I did notice as I was doing this earlier today that I actually have an incorrect amount of grams there. It's 0.8 grams of one color and 0.5 grams of your second color. The 0.8 grams is for your head, your legs, and then the belly will also be that color. And then the 0.5 grams is the shell color. I use a size D hook. You can also use a little bit larger hook. I wouldn't probably go any smaller than that, but a larger hook would probably be okay. I like a D because it makes my stitches nice and tight, and when I stuff my project, it will help keep me from having holes and being able to see the stuffing in. So with amigurumi or character yarn, crochet, you want to make sure that your stitches are nice and tight. You'll need some filling. I actually, just so you know, I didn't tell you all this yesterday, but I actually buy really cheap $2-3 pillows from Walmart and then just take the stuffing out of them. They literally last me forever. I can make tons of projects. I did 21 little bags of the stuffing yesterday for the project, and I ended up not even using half that pillow. So that's a good cheap way to get stuffing. Stuffing is really expensive if you buy it like at Hobby Lobby in the box or the bags, but this is a cheap way to do it. So, and then you'll need a needle and a stitch marker, and I'll talk about those in a second. So just a couple of things that I'll mention. Here's my hook. I love this hook because of the thickness of the handle, and it's also extremely smooth. It helps be able to pull the yarn through the holes without any drag. I also like the little bit more pointed tip at the end. It helps me dig into my stitches a little bit better when I've done a really tight stitch. This particular needle, the company that makes it no longer makes this particular needle. They do make other needles that are this shape, but no longer make this needle. So just be aware of that. If you're interested in this needle, I can tell you what company I got it from if you're wanting. It's not a cheap needle though. So scissors, I love these little scissors. They've got a nice pointed end. So again, if I need to dig into a stitch and kind of open it up a little bit, I have the ability to dig into it. This is also great to help stuffing into small areas as well. So that's why I use these scissors. They're a great little pair of scissors. I have no idea where I got them. This is my stitch marker. I have a ton of these. This one is one of my favorites. I actually have some that are a little bit bigger as well, but then you get a little bit bigger here. They make tons of different kinds of stitch markers. I've used tons of different kinds, but this one is by far my favorite because I can close it. And that is a really handy thing. Some of the other ones you can't close and they fall out. And then last but not least, this is my favorite tapestry needle to use. It has a nice big hole so I can get my yarn in there very easily, but the needle itself is very small and has a very pointed end. That's really important, and you wouldn't think that that would be important with crochet, but this is the ability to get the needle through the crochet as you're weaving in the ends is super important to have a smaller needle like this. So this is my favorite needle. I actually bought a packet of 50 of these. So if you're interested in one of these and want to try it, just say something. I will have it in my purse at church and I'm happy to give you one. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, one thing I do want to mention is there is an alternative to the magic circle. And I'm going to show that to you right now, but I'm also going to mention why I don't use this method and why I think that you need to learn the magic circle. This method is to chain 2 and then crochet 6 single crochets in the second chain from the hook. So to do a chain, we didn't talk about chains yesterday. This is how a lot of people do flat stuff. You're going to start by making a slip knot. That's how I make my slip knot. You can use whatever method you're most comfortable with. Then tighten it on your hook. I hold onto my little thing right there like that, and then I end up holding my knot with my thumb and my middle finger. Gives me a little bit more tension on that upper finger there. I'm going to chain 2, so I'm going to put the hook under the yarn and wrap it over the yarn over the hook and then pull through. That is 1 chain. Again, gonna wrap it around and pull it through. That is 2 chains. So now I have 2 chains. You can see the V shape. See if I can get it close enough that you can kind of see the V shape of those pieces. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna single crochet 6 stitches in this very first loop that we made, or first chain that we made. We're only going to go through half of the chain. So I'm going to go pick up the top half of that V, and I'm going to wrap my yarn around my hook, pull it through. Now I have 2 loops on my hook, and then I'm going to wrap it and pull it through those 2. That's 1 single crochet. I then start grabbing the back side of my stitches as I go. So now I'm going to do the same thing. In that chain, pull up a loop, and then I'm going to pull through both of those loops. That's 2. In here, pull up a loop, and then 3. In here, pull up a loop, and 4. 5. 6. Most amigurumi is just single crochet. So if you can get that whole single crochet down, most of the time you are good. Here is why I do not like this method. There is nothing for me to pull to tighten the hole that I have made. And that's a pretty good sized hole there, if you can see that hole. So when I get ready to go back around and make my stitch, close my circle up, which here's my first crochet, so I'm just going to close this one up and I'll show you. I have got a pretty good sized hole right there, and I don't like that. I want my hole to be able to be closed. So this is not my preferred method, but as somebody who's learning, if this is something you're more comfortable with to start with, this would be a good way to start with the legs. But I would probably try to encourage you not to use this method for the head or the shell. Okay, so let's go back to our magic circle, because again, I think that once you learn this, it makes it so much prettier and nicer and everything. Couple things that I want to mention to you. First of all, whenever we hold our yarn with our right hand, we always hold the long end, and we kind of leave our short end real loose. So you'll notice I'm taking a hold from the top of my yarn, and I'm laying it over my 2 fingers, holding my thumb there, wrapping it around, making a cross, and then holding my thumb there again. See if I can get that in the camera a little bit better. I've got my loose end there down towards my pinky finger, holding it down, wrapping it around, and making a cross, holding it with that. Then I'm going to flip my hand over, and I'm going to take my ring finger and my pinky, and I'm just going to put that long tail behind those fingers so that I have 2 lines on the top of my hand. Now I'm going to go under this loop and over this loop, and I'm going to take hold of with my hook, and I usually face my hook down, pull it up, and then I like to make a little loop in there. I just find that that helps secure things a little bit better. Okay, now I've got that loop on there. I'm going to, using that same string that I just picked up and pulled through, I'm going to pick that loop up right there, and I'm going to pull it through that little loop that I just made. All right, now let's go ahead and try that one more time. So once again, I'm going to lay my yarn over my fingers, hold it with my thumb, wrap it, make an X, flip it over, hold it there. This is pretty loose. The yarn can easily scroll through there. I'm not holding it so tight that it can't move. Again, under the front loop, over the back loop, pull it through and make a little loop there. Now, I go under the yarn and back through it and pull it through that little loop that I have there. All right. This next part is something that I found a lot of people were doing, I think, a little bit wrong. So I want to mention it to you. Now, I had you totally let go of it last night. That's fine. When I do it, I don't normally let go of this part of it. I actually hold it. But I want to show you that my 2 pieces of string or yarn are over here towards my left hand. All right, these are the 2 pieces. These 2 pieces are what we're going to crochet over. We're going to actually go over both of those as we crochet the next part. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap my fingers around my yarn so that I have some tension there on that top. But it's still loose enough that I can easily pull things through my fingers. All right. Now I'm going to poke my fingers through my hole. I'm going to poke my 2 fingers through the hole, and I'm going to hold those 2 strings down here towards the bottom of the circle with my thumb. Because I'm going to work, if I can get a hold of it here, I'm going to work right in here. So let's see if I can get that pulled through. All right, so again, put my fingers in there, kind of hold it with my thumb, and I'm going to work into there, grab my yarn, pull it through that big loop. Now I've got 2 loops on my hook. Grab my yarn and pull it through. All right, Peter, can you let Amaya in? Again, we're going to do the same thing. In the big loop, grab my yarn, pull it through, 2 loops on my hook, grab my yarn, that's single crochet number 2. All right, let's do that whole thing one more time, just so that you've got it comfortable. Again, wrap it around my fingers, make an X, hold it on my thumb, flip it over, hold it with my fingers, and now I'm going to go under this loop, over this loop, pull it through, and kind of make a little bit of a loop. Then we're going to grab underneath that one and pull it through that little circle that we made. This is tight, so you just have to kind of work it through. All right, let go, wrap it around my fingers, stick my fingers in there, and I'm going to work above my finger, underneath and around those 2 pieces of yarn that I've got, the little tail plus the circle. In the circle, grab my yarn, pull it through, and then pull it through. In there, grab my yarn, pull it through, got 2 loops. That's 2. Grab my yarn, pull it through, and through. 3, 4, 5, 6. All right. Whenever I'm finished, I like to make a nice big loop, then I don't have to worry about that loop coming out, okay? So I want to show you now a little bit about this. See See if I can get in under the camera so you can see. So I want to show you real quick a little bit about these stitches. These stitches have V's on the top. All right. So here we've got one side of a V and the other side of a V. All right, so that is one stitch. That's actually my very first stitch that I made in there, my first single crochet. Here's 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay? So we're gonna work into now that very first stitch that I made. All right? Underneath those V's, there's a little hole. But again, the first thing that we have to do is we got to do the magic, and we have to pull that little tail to tighten up that circle. This is why I use the magic circle and not the other method. I can tighten it up. I don't have to pull on it, tug on it super, super tight at this point in time, just enough that it makes it nice and round so that I can easily see where I am. Again, if I need to count backwards to find that first stitch, I can do so. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and there's that first stitch right there. That didn't help, but that's where it's at. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and stick my needle in my hole, and I'm going to pull my long end to tighten it around that piece. Kind of tuck that little string of the short end behind you. By the way, you can kind of see as you're doing this, my hook is on the right hand side, okay? If I had, and my circle is down. If I had it this way, this is the back of the piece. And the stitches look slightly different. There's like a line on the back. This one, it's a little bit prettier, and that's why you're gonna wanna use this side. Wrap my fingers around so I've got some pressure on this top part here, and I'm going to use my thumb and my middle finger to hold my worked piece as I do this. And I'm just gonna kind of rotate it around as I go. So with it tight, but not so tight that I can't move it, I wanna be able to move my circle back and forth as I do this. I am going to take my hook and stick it through that V, both pieces of the V, in that back, on that very first stitch that I did. I'm going to yarn over my hook, pull through, oops. This is why I like that sharper needle, because I can stick it through that hole really easily. Yarn over, pull it through, okay? I've got 2 on my hook, and then I'm going to pull it through. All right, that stitch right there needs to be marked. That's my first stitch in a round. This particular round, I am doing increases around each stitch. So that means 2 single crochets in every stitch. So now I'm going to put my needle back in exactly where I did the first time. And I'm going to pull it up and make another stitch. So I've got 2 in that first stitch. If you have trouble, can't find where you're supposed to be, count backwards. This is my very first stitch. Here is the last stitch of the previous round. So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I put it in the same stitch that I started with, which was 6. All right, so now I'm going to work 2 stitches in stitch 5, which is that little hole. Now you'll notice my hole in the center has gotten a little bit bigger. That's okay, because I'm going to yank that tail really tight on my next round. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and do 2 stitches in stitch number 5. So I'm going to stick it here, pull it up, and wrap it around, pull it through the 2. Again, stick it in the exact same place, pull it up, and wrap it around and do 2. By the way, that very first stitch that we did, that's usually the hardest one. Once you've got that down, it makes it a lot easier to see where the stitches are because you've got a little bit of a lip there. Next, we're going to do it in the next stitch. 2 single crochets in the next stitch. 1, 2. Turn my work a little ways, and then I'm going to do it in the next stitch. Again, I'm going under both of the 2 V pieces. 1, 2. Okay. Next up is 2 in this next one. 1, 2. And we are at my last stitch of the previous round, so we're going to do 1, 2. All right, so now I should have 12 stitches in this circle, starting with the one that's in my stitch marker is in. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. All right, now I can tighten that hole really, really well. All right, so I'm going to find my short end again, and I'm just going to take a hold of my work, and I'm going to pull it really tight. As tight as I can get it. If it feels like I'm going to break that string, I'm going to stop, but I want to get that as tight as I possibly can. Next round is a single crochet and an increase. So we're going to do 1 single crochet in 1 stitch, and then we're going to do an increase in the next stitch, and then we're going to do that 6 times. So we're going to go around the entire circle again, doing 1 single crochet and then 2 in the next stitch. That's going to give us 18 stitches in our round. So I'm going to take my stitch marker out, put it down. So I easily know where that first stitch is because I had that stitch marker in there. Now, one thing I will mention, I like to crochet my tail, my starting tail in at this point in time. And the reason that I do that is because it helps secure that center loop a little bit. It doesn't really matter. Chances of it coming out are pretty slim. I usually leave a pretty big long line, so if it did start to come out, it would take a lot of effort for it to come all the way out, but this helps prevent it from coming out. So I'm going to go ahead and stick my hook in my thing, but instead of actually making my stitch, I'm going to just kind of put my tail over the top of my thing so that I'm crocheting over the top of it, getting my line again, and now I'm going to pull through underneath all of those pieces and then through that piece. So it's just kind of lying over the top of that single crochet that I had made there. We'll go ahead and mark that stitch. I always mark my first stitch. Again, it's up to you if you want to mark your first stitch or your last stitch. I just have always used the first, just keep track of it that way. So that's my first stitch. It's a single crochet. The next thing I'm going to do in the next stitch is an increase. An increase is 2 stitches. So we're going to go in there and we're going to do 1 and 2. And again, I've crocheted over the top of this tail, so it's kind of just going around the circle with me. All right, so now we have 3 stitches. 1, 2, 3. Next thing we're going to do, we're going to repeat. We're going to do 1 single crochet in the first stitch and then an increase in the next stitch. 1 single crochet in the first stitch and an increase in the second stitch. Okay. The next one you're going to do same thing, a single crochet in the next stitch and an increase in the next stitch. Okay. You're going to notice that your work, if you're a tight crocheter like I am especially, at this point in time it's going to start kind of curving in. All right. that is the wrong direction technically. This is the back, this is the front. So the part that's facing you is the front. You want to make sure that as you crochet, you keep it kind of turned out that direction. Okay? Again, single crochet in the first stitch, increase in the next stitch. Okay? Single crochet in the first stitch, increase in the next stitch. Next up, single crochet in the first stitch, increase in the next stitch. Once I've gotten all the way around, I don't worry about crocheting my tail in anymore. I just kind of tuck it back there in the back and it just sits there. But it would take a lot of effort for that to come out at this point in time. So I like to do that just to kind of give it a little bit extra security. Okay, so we have finished round 3. We now have 18 stitches in our circle and we're back to our stitch marker. The next one that we're going to do an increase and then 2 single crochets. So in the first stitch we'll do an increase and then we'll do 1 single crochet, 1 single crochet, and we'll do that 6 times. Everything's in the count of 6 in this particular pattern. Some of them are in 8, but I typically do mine in 6s. So, all right, so first one is a increase. So I'm going to do 2 single crochets in this first stitch. You'll notice I did not actually put my stitch marker in yet, but I'm still going to put it in the first stitch. I made 2 stitches here, so I want to make sure that it goes in that very first stitch that I made because that's the beginning of my round. So I'm just going to go ahead and place that stitch marker in there on that first stitch. Here's my second part of that increase. So that one is number 2. Now I'm going to do 2 single crochets, 1 in each of the next 2 stitches. So here's my next stitch. Okay, next up is an increase. So I'm going to do 2 single crochets in that stitch and then 2 single crochets, 1 in each of the next 2 stitches. All right, get my yarn pulled a little bit. I'm not working out of the center, so I've got this yarn kind of all over my floor now. All right, next up, an increase. You'll notice that my stitches at this point in time are a little bit loose, and then I kind of just pull a little bit on that top piece to tighten that up. Now I lost track if that was the increase, I'm pretty sure it was, but I know that I have made 4 stitches, an increase, 1, 2, an increase, 1, 2, and then I've got an increase. So next I'm going to do 2 single crochets, 1 in each of the next 2 stitches. So 1, 2. Next up is an increase. 1, 2, 3, 4. Increase and then 2 single crochets. Increase, single crochet. Next up is an increase and then a single crochet in the next 2 stitches. We are at the end of round 4. We have 24 stitches all the way around our little circle here. All right. Hey Peter, are you there? All right, the next thing we're going to do is we are going to, I'll just bring this down just slightly so you can take a look. We are going to do 3 rounds, rounds 5 through 7, with single crochets all the way around. So we're going to do 24 stitches all the way around with just one single crochet in each of the stitches all the way around. All right, take out my stitch marker. The nice thing about a stitch marker is at this point in time, I don't have to count. I know there's 24 stitches. I could have counted them to start with, but I don't have to actually. Peter, can you bring me some stuffing?
Yeah.
Mark my first stitch. Here's why I don't have to count, because I've marked that first stitch. So if I go all the way around, I know that that's my starting point, and I've done round 1. Okay, let me just fix. All right, so there's 1, do it all the way around, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Here's where you really start to feel that thing start to curl. And it's going to try to curl in like this. That's okay. Just take it and kind of use your fingers to shape it back out. It's going to want to do that kind of because of the way that you crochet, but just kind of take it. Now you've got kind of a little cup here with the piece that you crocheted in the center there, and that's okay. All right, so that one was round 5. By the way, I will tell you, normally I actually use electronic means to do this, but normally I would just mark off my rounds when I get down here to this. I know I have to have 3, so that was the first of the 3. So then I'm going to do the next one. We may pause this at this point in time, so go ahead and just do the 1 single crochet all the way around and meet me back here at the end. Peter? All right, hopefully you've gotten all 3 of those rounds done. I went ahead and did all 3 of those rounds, so I'm gonna mark that as completed. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna do a decrease. Basically, a decrease is the opposite of an increase, where we added 2 stitches into 1 stitch. This time we're gonna take 2 stitches and combine them together. We're gonna do what's called an invisible decrease. An invisible decrease is prettier because you can't tell that that's what you've done. And so this is how we do the invisible decrease. So the first thing that I want to teach you as we do this, however, is to talk a little bit about what's called the front loop and the back loop. So again, remember the part that you're working on as you go around this way on your circle, the part that's facing you is the outside. So hopefully you have flipped it around. This would be the inside. It kind of looks like lines, and there's actually like a line in the center. You want to flip it over, and there's just prettier stitches on this side. This yarn is not super easy to see that in, but there's like kind of like a little V on all of these that shows the, sorry, I broke my nail while I was doing this, shows the stitch a little bit better. Going back up to the top and the stitches that are up here at the top, we talked a little bit about those 2 V's. Let's see if I can get this into the camera. So that you can see what I'm talking about. So we've got this loop, this part of the stitch. I'll just pick it up with my needle. So this is what we call the front loop. It's the front of the 2 V pieces. This one back here is what we call the back loop. All right. We are going to do some work later on in the front loop and the back loop where we actually crochet only in the front loop and the back loop. But the way that we make a invisible decrease is we basically are going to pick up the front loop of the first 2 stitches that we're going to crochet together, just that front loop. And that's what we're going to use to crochet into. So just kind of showing you, hopefully that got on camera. You're going to go into that front loop, pick it up with your hook, and then you're going to again go into that front loop and pick it up with your hook. So now we technically have 3 loops on our hook, but we're going to count this as 1. And we're going to pull through that, and we're going to have now the regular 2 loops that we need on our hook. So that is a decrease stitch. We have basically taken 2 stitches and stitched them together. There are a couple of other ways to do it, but this is the prettiest one. This is standard for amigurumi, to make sure that those 2 stitches are nice and clean together there. So our around this time is a decrease and then 2 single crochets, 1 in each of the next 2. So we crocheted, you can kind of see right there that all of that is kind of worked together. So our next crochet, or our next stitch is right here. We're going to do 1, 2. Now, before I go on, I want to take this and show you once again where we're going to crochet. So here's the first stitch, here's the second stitch. But again, we're making a decrease, so we're going to pick up the front loop of both of those 2 stitches and crochet them together. So stick my needle, my hook back in there, and I'm going to do the front loop of this first one and the front loop of the second one on my hook, pull through, and then pull through. That's my second decrease, and then I'm going to do 2 single crochets, 1 in each of the next 2. Again, showing you where our pieces are. Here's our first stitch, our second stitch. We're going to crochet those 2 together by picking up the front loops of both of those 2 stitches only. So front loop, pull and pull. All right, 2 single crochets. And then we're going to do the front loop only on the next 2 for that invisible decrease, and then 2. Okay, now this is kind of an interesting situation here. When I did this stitch on the previous round, my yarn kind of came apart. So there's kind of like this little funky thing going on up here. That's okay. I'm just going to kind of ignore it. I'm still going to work the invisible decrease in the front loops of those 2 stitches. So I'm just going to kind of ignore that weird little thing that I've got there. And I'm going to grab that front loop and grab that front loop. Okay, this is the stitch that actually kind of came apart, so it's a little bit less pretty. All right. Decrease that, and then 2 single crochets. Let me go back and show you. Because I just crocheted right over that, you cannot tell any difference where I skipped those 2 little places, that little place. So it's okay if for some reason your yarn separates a little bit. As long as you get the majority of your yarn, you'll be okay. So the next thing is a decrease. And single crochet in the next 2 stitches. All right. All right, next thing on my list, I'm going to mark this one off. The next thing it tells me to do is stuff it. So now I'm going to take my stuffing and I'm going to take a blob of it. And I like to kind of separate it out, so I just kind of pull it apart a little bit. It makes it a little fluffier and nice. And then I'm just going to kind of stuff it in there with my finger. All right. And get it in there pretty good. You don't want so much in there that you're not going to be able to continue to crochet because it's coming out. You can always add a little bit more on the next couple of rounds if you need to. I'm going to find the way that we're going to close this one off. You probably aren't going to need that much in there. So it's okay to have it loosely stuffed. This is part of why I use a small crochet hook and I crochet quite tight, because now you can tell on this side you can't even see that stuffing at all. And that's the goal. All right, so next up we're going to single crochet and then an invisible decrease. So we're going to do that 6 times. This becomes a little more tricky when we've got stuffing in here because we got to avoid the stuffing. So I always kind of push the stuffing down into it. I do my single crochet. All right, I'm going to mark that stitch. That's the beginning of my round. And then I'm going to do my invisible decrease. The invisible decrease with stuffing is not as hard because you're not going to be going all the way through the stitch. You're going to only be picking up the outside or the front 2 loops. So again, we're going to invisible decrease. Next is a single crochet. Again, we're going all the way through underneath both these in this particular one, so we need to push that stuffing down. Now we've got an invisible decrease. And then single crochet, invisible decrease. Single crochet, invisible decrease. Single crochet, invisible decrease. Okay, we've got 3 stitches left. Perfect, that's what we want. Single crochet and invisible decrease. Okay. All right. That gives us 12 stitches on our circle. At this point in time, I'm going to put just a hair bit more stuffing in there. It's not going to be very much. This is actually probably too much. Just to make it just a little bit tighter. It's always easier to go ahead and do a little bit more when it's got a bigger circle in there. Normally we would be making it completely a circle by going decreases next, but we're not going to actually do that. We're going to actually do a single crochet all the way around on this. So this next stitch, we're going to need to push our stuffing down all the way as we go, because we don't want to pick up that stuffing and bring it through it all. So here's our single crochet, and we're going to do that 12 times all the way around. Place my stitch marker. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and I'm back to my beginning. I've got a little knot going on in my yarn over here, so I need to kind of clean that up before we go on. Okay. All right, last thing on this is, I didn't mark this off, so let me go ahead and do that. I did 9, I did 10, I did the 12 all the way around. So I'm on number 11. Next is we're gonna fold it in half and we're gonna single crochet across both sides. Finish off and weave in the end. So I'm going to take my stitch marker out at this point in time, and I actually do not need to put it back in, so I'm just going to set it off to the side right now. Put my thing in there, and I'm going to fold my piece in half, okay? This is probably a little bit tricky because you got to kind of figure out where this first stitch needs to go. So here is my first stitch on this side. Here is the last stitch on the other side, okay? So I'm gonna actually need to go through that piece right there. That is probably pretty tricky to get your needle that way, so you kind of have to maneuver it. It helps to identify where that stitch is on the front end. So I've through that first stitch. Now I'm gonna actually take my hand out and I'm gonna flip this around so that I can grab hold of that other stitch right there. And I'm gonna go through that back stitch. So I've gone through both the front stitch and the back stitch. I'm gonna pull my yarn all the way through both of those. So in other words, that's 4 pieces, the front and back loop on both sides. So there's 1. I'm going to do the same thing next. I'm going to go through this next stitch. This one's a little easier to see. I went through that stitch, so now I need to go through this stitch. So again, now I've got I've got my needle under 4 pieces there. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to grab my yarn, pull it through all 4 of those. Now I've got 2 on my hook. I'm going to pull that up. Next stitch is right here and right there. I'm going to do the same thing. Okay. Pull through all 4 of those, up and in. Okay, next up, same thing. 4, 5. Okay, this last one, it is literally just around the back piece of this last loop. So you can just kind of go there. So I've got 6 stitches up there on the top. Nice pretty stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. I hold my long end of my string and I just cut it right there like that. Then I take a hold of this loop and I pull that through, that end through. That's called finishing off, where you've just pulled that through. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to weave in my end. So now I'm going to need that tapestry needle that I talked about. I just stick the end of my yarn through the tapestry needle. Some people like to use the like needle threaders. That's fine. I don't. Usually do that. And then I'm going to do what's called weaving in my end. You want to make sure that when you weave in your ends that you do it kind of up and around the stitches. It makes it a whole lot easier for it to not come out. The advantages of this head is that we are actually, we're going to actually sew over the top of all of this. So it's going to be hard for it to come out. But I kind of just take that end and I just kind of weave it in and out using my tapestry needle, in and out of some of those stitches, and I kind of do it around the piece. If I was doing a circle, I might go back the opposite direction and kind of go in and out of those stitches so that it's nice and weaved in there, and it's going to take a lot for that string to then come out. Okay. Again, I want to make sure that I can still see my 6 stitches up here at the top. It's not the end of the world if you can't, because you can kind of play with it. It's going to be underneath the thing. And then I actually pull the piece pretty tight, cut out, and then it kind of just goes back in there a little ways. So there's my head. All right. Set my head aside. I've got this extra string. We can just throw that away. I saved this, by the way. I saved this and use it for stuffing. So don't throw away all your ends, but you don't need it for this particular project anymore. So you can just set it off to the side. We're gonna make 4 fins. You will use the same color as you did for your head, and it's actually exactly the same pattern up to where you started crocheting single crochet all the way around. So you've already done this. This is super simple for you. We will not be stuffing our fins. They are just folded in half and crocheted atop. So first thing, magic circle, 6 crochets in there. Then we'll do an increase all the way around for 12 stitches. Single crochet and increase 6 times for 18 stitches, increase and 2 single crochets 6 times for 24 stitches. Then we're going to fold that in half and we're going to make it into a fin by crocheting 12 stitches kind of around that round section, and then weave, fasten off and weave in the ends. One thing I do want to mention, sometimes your pattern will tell you that you are going to sew the piece on rather than actually crochet it in like I am having you do on this particular pattern. So occasionally you're going to see, instead of fasten off and weave in the end, you're going to see fasten off, leaving a long tail for sewing. So when we get to the end, I'll try to show you how much I do when I have to do that. It depends on the piece, of course, but you want to make sure you've got a long enough tail that you'll be able to use that tail to sew that piece on. I personally do not like sewing pieces on. This with crocheting it in, I am guaranteed to have my fins and my head exactly where I want them. Whereas if I am sewing them on, I could be a stitch or two off and it could be lopsided. So this is my preferred method. Not always are you going to be able to do this, but and a lot of patterns have you sew the pieces on. So just be aware of that and pay attention to how that is worded. All right, so we're going to go ahead and do fin, this fin. And so again, magic circle. Make your 2 fingers, wrap your thing around and make an X in the back, flipping it over and holding that tail with your finger there. Then we're going to go under that front loop, over the back loop, and pull up a string, making a little loop on your thing. Keeping this pretty loose so that you have the ability to pull on it, you're going to go ahead and grab hold of that string and pull it through that circle there. Then you can let go. You can go ahead and grab hold of your yarn over here on the left, and then you're gonna put your fingers through your hole, making sure that the 2 strings are on the left side of that circle. Going under those 2 strings, pull up a loop, and then pull through both loops that were on your hook. That is stitch 1. Doing the same thing. Pull up a loop, and then 2. Pull up a loop, then 3. Pull up a loop, 4. Pull up a loop, 5. Got a little tight there and it came out, that's okay. I just pulled on it to kind of give me a better loop. That was 5 and 6. So I should have 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Perfect. I'll go ahead and kind of undo this piece right here and pull my string so that I close up my magic loop. Okay? I can keep it kind of loose this time through. This one is a little less of a big deal to make sure that it's tight, because this is the fin and we're not stuffing it. So we don't care whether or not the stuffing is gonna show through as much. Again, if you are having trouble finding where that first stitch is, that's okay, just count backwards. We've got stitch 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this right here is my first stitch. So I'm gonna put my hook under both sets of the V's there, pull through, and finish my single crochet. Mark my stitch so that I know where I started. All right. Next, this round is increases in every stitch. So this time we need to go back into the same stitch. Again, if you're having trouble figuring out where that stitch is, you can count backwards. This is now my first stitch of that new round, the second round. So this right here is the last stitch of my previous round. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I need to go into this stitch right here that I previously went into, because I'm doing an increase right now. Making sure you grab hold of the right string, okay? So I'm gonna go back into that same stitch, pull up a loop, and pull through both of those loops. There's one increase. Next, it becomes easier to see. This is 2 increases. Next is 3 increases. 4 increases. 5 increases. And 6 increases. All right. I've got a little bit of a hole in my center because it wasn't pulled super tight, and as I worked through those stitches it kind of loosened up, so I'm just going to flip it over. I'm going to grab hold of my short tail there, and I'm just going to pull it pretty tight to make sure I close up that loop all the way. Again, if you start to feel that string break, stop. All right, so we now easily can see where our first stitch is because we have a stitch marker in there. So sometimes if I can tell I'm gonna have a hard time seeing that stitch, I might pull on it a little bit to make that hole pretty easy. But I'm gonna take my stitch marker out, immediately stick my thing in there. This round is a single crochet in the first stitch and an increase in the second stitch 6 times. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to do a single crochet in this first stitch. And then I'm going to mark that stitch. And then we've got increase in the next stitch. So here's my next stitch. 1, 2. Then we've got a single crochet and an increase. Single crochet, increase. Okay, I just noticed that I did not start crocheting my tail in. And so to help make sure that that tail stays in there, well, I'm gonna go ahead and start doing that. So I'm just gonna pull it up there to where I'm working, and I'm going to go ahead and add it over the top of my hook this time. So single crochet and an increase. Single crochet, increase. And a single crochet and an increase. All right, very good. My stitches are a little looser than my other one was, which is totally fine because again, this is a fin, so we don't really care how tight those stitches are. Our next round we're ready for is going to be an increase and then 2 single crochets 6 times around. So the first stitch gets an increase. Again, if you were not sure, you could technically count backwards to find your stitches. We have a total of 18 stitches. So starting on the one not next to the hook, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Right there is my stitch. And we're doing an increase and 2 single crochets. So I'm going to start my increase. There's the first half of my increase, or the first stitch of my increase. I'm going to mark that. That's my first stitch of my round, so I like to mark my first stitch. And then I increase that second in that same place that I made that first stitch. There's the increase, and now I'm going to do 2 single crochets in the next, or 1 single crochet in the next 2 stitches. 1, 2. Increase is next. Increase. And 2 single crochets. Okay. I've got enough of my tail wrapped in there, so I'm just going to kind of let it go there, and it can sit in the background there. So now I've got an increase and 2 single crochets. Increase and 2 single crochets. Increase and 2 single crochets. Got 3 stitches left in my round, so I've got, and 4 with the ink is going to end up there, so we got an increase and 2 single crochets. Perfect. All right, we've done everything in the round that we're going to do. The next thing that we need to do is we're going to fold it in half and do 12 single crochets across both sides of the piece. So we're going to close this up. The first thing we're going to do is take our stitch marker out. Make sure I've got enough yarn to do this with. And I'm going to make sure my tails are kind of tucked in there well, so I don't have to worry about them coming out. Fold it in half, making sure that my stitch is right there at the back, the end of that back piece. So when we crochet into this one, we need to, the 2 pieces, we need to find our next stitch, which is this one right here, and the back of the last stitch in the back, which is that one right there. Okay, so I'm going to put my hook back into my thing, pull my yarn tight, and I'm going to go into the front of that stitch, and I'm going to go into the other 2 underneath the other 2 there, so it's right there. If you don't get it perfect, it's okay, as long as you get it towards the end there, okay? That's probably one of the hardest stitches to make because it's kind of in an awkward position and you're pulling that really tight around your hook. And then you're going to go ahead and not do that where it comes out. You're going to grab hold of it and you're going to go through all 4 of those pieces of yarn. The 2 V's, the 2 on the front and the 2 on the back. Now I've got 2 hoops on my needle, yarn over and pull through those 2 loops. That's my first single crochet. From here on out, it's a pretty easy thing to see where my front and my back stitches are. They kind of line up if I've done it right. So it's pretty easy to see, okay, I'm going through that front one and I'm going through that back one. Okay, grab my yarn, pull through all of those 4 pieces of yarn and come back over. That's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, here's kind of the last opportunity to make sure your tail's not poking out. Okay, push it in if you need to. 9, 10, 11, 12. Once again, your pattern may say to leave a long tail for sewing. If you did, then at this point in time, depending on which direction you were sewing, if you were going to have to sew all the way back around this, you're going to need to make sure that your tail is probably at least 4 times that. But I actually would probably give it even more than that. We're going to weave in the end because we're going to actually crochet it into our piece, so I don't need anywhere near that long of a tail. So I just pull my loop out a little ways and then I pull my long end and cut that string and pull it through. That's called fastening off. You're going to fasten off even if you're leaving a long tail for sewing because that's what kind of finishes that stitch off. Again, we're going to weave in our ends like we did on our head. So go ahead and take your tapestry needle and put your yarn in the tapestry needle. And then this one, I'm gonna kind of go around and then back as I weave in this end so that it kind of has stuff going on there. Okay. Alright, there's part of it. Kind of make sure my stitches are still easily seen because I'm going to have to do those in a minute. So now I'm going to go down here. Just kind of go back and forth a little ways. Pull it up into this part. And then I'm going to go back up here. That's not coming out of there. It would take a lot for that little piece of string to come out of all of that wrapping, and back and forth. Think about putting it in the washing machine or the dryer. All that agitating of the thing, that's why you want to make sure that your tails are weaved in like this, back and forth. It's important. Cut that off. And again, one thing I will mention, I don't know if I've said this already or not, but these little tails, I actually save these pieces and I use them for stuffing. Obviously I don't need them with this project probably because I am not stuffing these fins. We could put them in the body, but my body is going to end up being white, so I'm actually going to use regular stuffing for that. But these would be great if I've got a darker thing, or if I had another project with this dark green, it'd be great to use the stuffing so I don't have to worry about it showing through. So. All right, we'll go ahead and let you finish the other 3 fins, and we'll meet you back here to start the shell in just a little bit. Peter, can you come stop this?
Yep.
And you can't print while I'm recording because it's so loud.
Oh, fine.
Oops. Yeah, you moved it pretty good.
We're gonna have, dang it.
All right, welcome back. I have my 4 fins and my head. And so we're ready to move on to the shell. We'll just set those off to the side. You're gonna pull those in later on. So now we're going to use our second color. We're gonna make our shell. We're gonna start very close to the same way that we've been doing everything else. So you'll notice that the first 4 rows of the leg are the same as the first 4 rows of the shell. The 5th row adds an additional set of stitches in, so that we end up with 30, and then the 6th row also adds an extra set of stitches in, so we end up with 36. And then we'll go around 4 times to make it puff out into a circle, and then we're gonna do something new called front loop only. So we're gonna, I'll kind of push this out of the way, but you can kind of follow along as you go. Again, so we're starting with our second color here. I'm using white from my shell. So we're gonna start the same way. Make our magic circle, wrap our yarn around our fingers and hold that down, wrapping it back around over onto the other side. Then we pull a loop up using that, and then pull in another loop so it's nice and tight up there on the top. Holding our yarn so that the 2 strings, the tail plus the loop, are over on the left side. We're going to go through and pull up and around to make our first single crochet. 2 single crochets, 3, whoops, missed one, 4, 5, and 6. Just to double check that I've got everything good, I'm going to just count those. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've got 6 V's on there, and then a little back loop. Uncoil that piece and pull my magic circle so it's pretty tight. Doesn't have to be super tight on this round. Okay, pull my string kind of out of the way. Again, if you need to count backwards to find where your first stitch is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. My first stitch is right there. I'm going underneath both of the 2 V's there in that loop, pulling it up and doing my single crochet. Then I'll mark that stitch. Okay. I'm doing increases all the way around in this particular row, so I will go ahead and put another stitch in the same hole underneath, again, those 2 same loops that I was under. So there's my second one and my increase. Doing a single increase in both, in every stitch all the way around. So that's 2, 3, 4, got a little fast on that one. This is 5, and the last increase is 6. Okay, now I want to make sure that my circle is nice and tight on this one, because this is the back of the shell, and so we don't want any holes there. So we want to go ahead and take a hold of our string and pull that hole tight as we can get it without breaking that string. And so you shouldn't have any kind of hole there at all. You may find a little bit of holes there depending on how loosely you crocheted the rest of those pieces. I'm going to go ahead and crochet my tail in as I go on this round. This round is round number 3. So I'm doing a single crochet and then an increase 6 times. Again, if you need to count backwards to find your first stitch, you can do so. We have 12 stitches in this round. So here is stitch 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and here is 12 right there. So if I wanted to make my hole a little bigger, I could stick my needle in there, kind of move it around so I can easily find where that stitch is. Single crochet and then an increase. So we're going in there, we're doing a single crochet. That's my first stitch of the round, so I need to make sure I remember to put my stitch marker in. And then we're going to do increase. I don't think I added my tail in like I told you I was going to, so let me do it on this one. There's my increase. Okay, next one is single crochet and then an increase. And single crochet and an increase. Single crochet, increase. Okay, there is round number 3 completed. So we now have 18 stitches around. You can count them if you would like. Again, that's an easy way to get back to your first stitch. But again, we should have that marked, so it should be easy to see which one that is as we need to pull that stitch marker out. Next up, we're going to do an increase and then 2 single crochets around. I'll go ahead and do that. Go ahead and count to yourself, and I think you can do it. I'm confident. We've done this many times now, right? So this is the increase portion. Don't forget to place your stitch marker I have a tendency on my increases to count them as one fluid movement, so I go back after the fact and add that stitch marker in. But you can do it either way. Okay, so I lost count because I was looking at the video camera, so I need to go back and kind of count my stitches. So this is my increase. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. That's my first set. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's my second set. So I'm on an increase next. It's really bad when you end up with like 75, well, wouldn't have 75 normally, but you know, I've had some rounds where there was 100 stitches in there and I get about halfway through and I'm like, okay, I don't remember if I'm on an increase or a decrease or what I'm on. So like that. Okay, I'm all the way around my third round, and so my fourth round is going to be, I lied, that was fourth round. So let's look, just because there's a question on how many rounds we've done. So you have to pay attention to your pattern to see whether or not your magic circle is counting as one. Mine does. When I write a pattern, I use the magic circle as round 1. So I count the whole, the kind of the circle portions, not the yarn portions. So kind of the where the holes are. So this is going to be round 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'm going to be starting round 5. So this is the last one here, the last set of holes, which is where our stitches are that we're going to work, is the next round that we're going to be doing. That's round 5. Okay, so round 5 is going to be, oh, by the way, the other way that you can do it is count your stitches around. So we know at this point in time, we would have potentially 18 or 24 or 30 stitches around. So we could just count those really quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24 stitches. So we know that we have finished round 4 because we have 24 stitches in that round. So the next round is 3 single crochets and then an increase 6 times. So we're gonna start with our first single crochet, make sure we mark that stitch. As we get bigger, it becomes even more important to mark your stitches because it's harder to find your starting point once you've got it pretty big. When you're in the beginning, you can kind of see where your first stitch was. I will tell you, on one of my fins, I think it was, I lost count, and I just kind of figured out just about where my first stitch was. It wasn't that big of a deal. It's not going to make that big of a noticeable thing. As long as you end up with 24 or 30 stitches at the end of that round, then it's okay if it's off by 1 or 2 stitches. It will make a big difference if you're making something huge and you lose a couple of stitches. So you definitely want to use some sort of marker so that you are counting from a place to count from. All right, so we're doing 3 single crochets and then an increase. There's 1, 2, 3, next is an increase. Okay, and then 1, 2, 3, and then an increase. Okay. Alrighty. I am finished with round 5. Alright, I'm getting a pretty good sized circle going here. If you're curling up like this, again, just push it back so that you're curling the right direction. This yarn doesn't seem to, I'm not crocheting as tight as I normally do, I think, on the shell here with this yarn. So, alright. Next up is round 6. So I just want to show you real quick on round 6. When I write my patterns, I do alternate where my increases are. And that helps keep my shape more round rather than hexagon shaped. So you're gonna see starting here in, well, we don't go very big on this, so, but starting in round 6, I'm actually splitting my single crochets to the front and the back of this section. So we're gonna start off by doing 2 single crochets and then an increase. And then we're gonna do 4 single crochets and then an increase. And we're gonna do that 4 single crochets and an increase 5 times. You're gonna notice in my patterns, I've got a back bracket here. Most of the time in patterns, you're gonna see back brackets with the 5 times like that. So you know, I'm gonna do what's in those brackets 5 times. And then once I'm done with that, I'm gonna do 2 single crochets to end this round. So I've already pulled my stitch marker. So the first thing I'm going to do is 2 single crochets. There's 1. Make sure I put my stitch marker back in place. And there's 2. Now I'm going to do an increase in this stitch. Only got I missed one of the pieces of the string there, so this is still my increase. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, next up we start a bracket, and we're going to do what's inside that bracket 5 times. So it's a 4 single crochets, so single crochet in the next 4 stitches, and then an increase. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and now an increase. 1, 2. Okay. Next, again, 4 single crochets and an increase. That was the first of our 5. So this is the second of our 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and an increase. Next up, same thing, 4 and an increase. This will be our third one of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and an increase. And again, 1, 2, 3, 4, and an increase. All right, that was the 4th of the 5 that we're going to do. And so the next one is our last one. 4 single crochets, 1, 2, 3, 4, and an increase. Okay, we got through the bracket, our 5 times through the bracket, and then the last thing that we do on this round is 2 single crochets for a total of 36 stitches. 1, 2. All right. Next up, we're going to do 4 rounds of single crochets evenly around. So 36 stitches all the way around. We're just going to do 1 single crochet in every one of those stitches. 4 rounds of that. Again, I like to mark off, and I haven't been doing it because I've been I usually do it on my tablet, so it's kind of odd here. So when I'm here, I'm going to tally my 4 just because I find that's the easiest way for me to make sure that I'm doing the right number. I can count them, but it's a whole lot easier to tally them for me. So taking out my stitch marker, single crochet all the way around. I'm going to go quiet and just count to myself. I'll let you do that as well. Don't forget to put your stitch marker in at the beginning of every round. Okay, I got through my first round of single crochets all the way around. Again, if your work is starting to poof up so that the, whoops, I just did not pull my string far enough and yanked my tail and pulled out a couple of stitches. So I'm gonna have to redo a couple of stitches real quick. But if your work is turning the wrong side out, make sure at this point in time that you start kind of working it so that your circle is going the right way. So again, to see the difference, the inside is just kind of not as pretty. It's got a lot of lines on it. The outside, I can really see it in the center. So the center has these little lines kind of on the wrong side that are kind of there, and it's not clear and pretty around the center, but the outside, the part that's supposed to be, is kind of nicely shaped right there. The other way that I tell is that I always crochet from right to left. And when I'm crocheting right to left, the outside is toward me. So that's how you can tell which is the right side and which is the wrong side. It's very easy to get it mixed up. Some people talk about the noodle in the bowl making sure that the noodle is in the bowl. That's a great idea as long as you've remembered to put your tail on the inside. Not everybody does, so sometimes that gets a little confusing. We'll probably pause the video at this point in time and meet you back here after you have finished your other 3 rows of the single crochet around. So there's a total of 4. So I'll just meet you back here at that point in time for the last row of this shell. right, so I have come to the end of my 4 rounds of single crochets all the way around. So I have a nice little dome here. Again, make sure shell in this particular case, make sure you're facing out the right direction so that the pretty part is on the outside. Next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna do front loop only, single crochets evenly around. So you'll remember back when we talked about the head and we were crocheting the decreases on the head, we talked about the anatomy of a stitch. And we talked about the fact that with a stitch there is a V. The front part of the V, the part that's facing you as you crochet around, that's the front loop. And then the back part is called the back loop. So what we're going to do in this particular stitch is we're going to work in just the front loops of all of these stitches all the way around. I'm going to actually recommend that you mark the first back stitch because that will make it easier to find later on. And I'm actually going to do that with some yarn. So this is my very first stitch. This is the one I just pulled my mark out of. So I'm going to go into the back loop portion of it, and I'm going to grab one of the leftover pieces of my cuts previously, and I'm just going to pull that through halfway, and I'm just going to kind of set that in there so that I can find that back loop easily when I get to that section. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do again is we're going to just single crochet all the way around, but we're going to only do it in those front loops, those parts that are facing us. So here we go. I'm going to just go kind of under that front loop. All right, so I only have one of those 2 V's on my hook. Pull through that and pull through again. I like to make these stitches a little bit looser because this is the shell part that sticks out. You don't have to, you can make them tight as well. But I do like to I just think it gives it a little bit more flair that way. I still mark this stitch because I want to easily be able to figure out where I get back to when I get back to it. So that's why I used a different stitch marker on that back piece. I just threw that thing in there so I can easily find where that stitch is when the time comes that I need to do it. So again, what we're going to do is we're going to go all the way around, but we're only going through that front loop when we get ready, when we do the first half of our single crochet. So front loop only, okay? Pull through that and then pull through again. Front loop only. Pull through that and then pull through again. All right, and we're going to do that all the way around, front loops only. What this is doing is it's making that section kind of pop out. The stitches that we're making right now, they're kind of popping out, and that's what makes our shell look like a turtle shell. It also is going to give us the ability to crochet on that same stitch, that same round again to start the belly portion. And that is when we add our pieces in, our head and our fins in. So just go ahead and crochet 36 stitches around, front loop only. All right, I'm at my last stitch. I'm going to go ahead and finish that stitch off. I'm going to fasten off, cut that string. Don't need a very long tail. And this one I'm going to not weave in. I'm going to actually push it into the inside. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take from the inside, I'm going to find the back of the, a back loop here somewhere. I don't want a back loop that I'm going to crochet in. So you can see this right down here. This is my starting back loop that I'm going to be crocheting in. This one right here is my ending one. I need to be able to get that white underneath it, but I don't want it to just be under that one loop. So I'm going to actually kind of go under it, and I'm going to go through this loop right here as well. And I'm going to pull it through those two loops so that it's kind of sitting underneath all of that. And what that's going to do is it's going to kind of put it inside my shell. That way I don't need to weave this end in. Now you can if you want, but that's not necessary to do. Okay? All right, so now we can take out our stitch marker. All right. The next thing that we will find on our instructions is that we're going to switch to the green yarn. And I have my green yarn wrapped around my leg, the leg of my chair, so that's super helpful. I'm going to go ahead and pull out some of this green yarn so that I've got a good chunk of it ready for this next portion. Now, we have to connect this green yarn in here so that it's not going to come out. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to do a slip knot on our yarn and pull it a little bit tight so that it's on our hook. And you probably didn't see that. So let me try that again so that you can see it. I want those kind of handy, so I'm not pushing them all the way out of the way, but we'll see here. I do like to put a little bit of string in. Whoops, I just did a knot instead of a slip knot. A little bit of string on my slip knot because I actually am going to tie my slip knot inside my character so that I am less worried about it actually coming apart. So I did my slip knot. And now I'm going to actually connect it kind of before that stitch, okay? So this is where my first stitch is, right here. I'm going to actually connect it just in this loop right before that stitch. That's kind of the inside of the previous round. And I'm going to use that stitch to make a single crochet. That single crochet is not going to count, okay? That single crochet right there is actually going to just be kind of a starting stitch. We're not going to actually use it. I actually had it flipped around, so I'm going to do that one more time and do it facing the right direction. So you always want to be working, you know, in the right direction. It will help make sure things are as clean as possible. But I found where that stitch that I want to start in is. I want to put that in there, and I just want to pull up my loop and make a single crochet there. I'm going to stick my tail inside because I'm going to end up tying that ending white string and the beginning green string together at the end of this round. Okay, so this is a complicated round because what we're going to do on this round is we're going to attach all of these pieces that we have created. Okay, so our fins and our head. And we want to make sure that the fins are the right direction and everything is good for you. So round 12 is what we are on, and we are going to work in the back loops of the round that is round, well, it's technically round 10 of back loops, but it's the one that we skipped when we did round 11. And I'm going to talk through this with you first, and then we'll do it. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with 2 single crochets. Remember, the one that we've attached is not counting. It's not counting as a single crochet. Okay, so we're going to do 2 single crochets, and then we're going to attach a leg, and we're going to crochet into our leg, kind of like we did with our around the edge, where we're crocheting 2 pieces together. That's what we're going to do. We're going to actually crochet 2 of the single crochets on the leg into the body, on each one of the legs. Okay, so we're going to attach a leg. The leg faces towards the back. This is his tail. Our ending part is his tail, just so you know. Okay, and we're going to crochet it on. And then we're going to single crochet 7 times to get around, and then we're going to attach another leg. Now this leg is going to face forward with the rounded side forward. So this one went on like this. This one's going to go on like that. So once again, this and that. So we're going to crochet 2 stitches together into the body. And then we're going to single crochet 2 stitches. Next, we're going to do the head. There are 6 stitches here on the head. We're going to crochet that head into that back loop with 6 stitches. So in that back loop, we're going to connect the head with 6 stitches. Then we're going to single crochet 2, and we're going to attach another leg. This time the leg is going to be facing forward again, so it's going to be with the loopy side forward. And I'm going to talk about which stitches you're going to do as we go. So that's 2 single crochets into that the leg, and then we do 7 single crochets. Then we attach the last leg with it facing like this, so it will be like this, and we'll do 2 single crochets there. And then once we're done with that, we'll end with 2 single crochets to get back to our starting stitches. All right, so first up, I'm going to move this out of the way. Hope you keep yours handy so that you will be able to see what you're doing and follow along with me, but I want to make sure that you don't have any interruption. Okay, so again, we are crocheting in the loops that we skipped, or those back loops. That first back loop, I actually already took the piece out, which I'll go ahead and stick it back in so you can see where it was. If you haven't taken yours out yet, that's probably a good idea. But this is where that first stitch was, right here. So that is going to be the first stitch that I crochet into. And I'm going to crochet 2 single crochets, not in the same stitch, but 1 single crochet in each stitch. So I'm going to crochet into that stitch right there. Single crochet. Mark that stitch because that is technically my first stitch. Okay. That's 1 single crochet, and then we are going to do 1 more single crochet. Okay, again in those back loops. You'll notice that I kind of fold over this ridge that I've made so that the back loops are sticking up for me. That makes it very handy. So the next thing that you're going to do is you're going to attach a leg. The leg faces with the loop, or the rounded side, towards the back. So it's going to go like this. All right. We are going to need to find the 2 stitches at the end of that rounded piece. This first stitch kind of got all wacky because of the when I weaved in the end. So you want to make sure you know where that stitch is. If you get it off a little bit, it's not the end of the world. With this particular fin, because it's facing the back, we actually are not going to use that as our first stitch. We're going to go to the second stitch. And the way that I do this is I have my loop on my needle, and I'm going to stick my needle into that stitch, the V of that stitch. That's the second stitch over. And then I'm going to take a hold of my character or my back, and I'm going to find my back loop, and I'm going to go down into that back loop. So from the outside into the inside. Then I take my string and I'm going to pull it through, tighten up my stitch a little bit, pull it through that white piece that I've got plus the fin, and I've got 2 loops on my hook and single crochet. Doing it again, but this time I'm going into that last loop in the fin, okay, and then the next stitch here on my character, okay. Pull it through all 3 of those pieces of yarn, have 2 stitches, and single crochet there. That one is now connected onto my body. Next up, we are going to single crochet 7. So again, back loops, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right. Next up is a leg. We're going to attach a leg. This leg faces with the round part to the front. Now we're going to do 2 stitches into this one. Let's see if I like it this way better. I'm, however, going to start with the one that's closest to the end. So we're going to do this one and this one. So again, take your character, kind of put him on the ground, and then you're going to push your needle through that first stitch on your fin and through from the front to the inside, or the outside to the inside of the other. And I've got my string on the wrong side, so I have to kind of move it around. Sorry about that. Pull my yarn through those 3 pieces and make a single crochet. Next up, we're going to go into the next loop on my fin and through the next loop on my body and pull through those pieces and single crochet. All right, so that fin is connected with 2 as well. Next, we single crochet 2. 1, 2. Next up, we're going to add the head. So the head, we've got 6 single crochets up here on the top of this head. They may be a little bit more difficult to see at this point in time, so it doesn't really matter exactly where you put them, but you want 6 crochets across this. So I can tell that this is my first stitch. So again, I want to make sure my head, the stuffing part, is sticking out, and I'm going to put my single crochet or my needle through that first single crochet top to bottom, and then I am going to stick my needle through from the outside to the inside of that next back loop. Pull through those stitches and single crochet there. The next one, again, I'm going to go through the next stitch on my head, through the next back loop, pull through all 3 of those pieces of yarn and up through the next stitch. That's 2. Find the next stitch in your head. 3. 4. 4, 5, and this last one for me is a little bit tough to see, so I'm just going to kind of poke it in there, make sure that it's in there. And here is number 6. Okay, so now my head is connected. Next up is 2 single crochets in the back loops. There's 1, 2. Next up, we're going to do a fin. This fin also faces towards, with the curvy side towards the head. Now that the head is on there, it makes it a little more easy to see which one it is. So what I'm going to do is, again, this one is going to be more like the first one we did, where we're going to start in not the first stitch, but into the second stitch on the fin. And so I'm going to find that, poke it through from the top to the bottom, and then I'm going to find my next stitch on my character, which is right there. That is single crochet 1, and then I'm going to go through the very last stitch on my fin and the next stitch on my body, and there's 2. Now that fin is connected. All right, next we're going to single crochet 7 in those back loops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Last fin. All right. This fin faces with the what's that called? The circle towards his bum. All right, or his tail. So this one is going to be like the one that's closest, the second fin that we did, where it's closest to the head, where we're going to go into the first stitch and then the second stitch. So again, from top to bottom, making sure that my circle is, my curved end is going towards the tail, and then through this back stitch here, there's 1, and this next stitch, there is 2. All right, last thing we're going to do is we're going to crochet into the last 2 back loops, 1 stitch in each one. 1, 2. All right, so now we are at the end of our round. I'm going to go ahead and pull that out. That was my stitch marker. I'm going to go ahead and pull it out so it doesn't confuse me. All right, now I have my first stitch marked here. This is my first stitch. So now what we're going to do is we're going to sink to, we are now, we just finished round 12. We are now going to move on to round 13. Round 13 is 2 single crochets and an invisible decrease, then 4 single crochets and an invisible decrease. Those are bracketed, and we're going to do those bracket section 5 times, and we're going to end with 2 single crochets. All right, I'm going to go ahead, and I know where that stitch is. I'm going to go ahead and take that stitch marker out so that I know where that, so that I'm ready to go. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and single crochet there. That's my first stitch of that round. So I want to go ahead and mark that stitch. Now, one thing that I'm going to do at this point in time, just because I like to kind of get this done before I go too much farther, is I'm going to actually tie these 2 ends together. I do it in a triple knot. That helps ensure that these are not going to come apart. They're going to just be stuffed into the body of this character, but this way I know that those aren't going to come apart in any way, shape, or form. So I just kind of knot them in there, And then I'm just gonna kind of fold them inside the character. And they're gonna get stuffing or inside there with them as well. But that way they aren't, they're not in my way. They're kind of just out of the way now. I've got them secured well. And I can move on. All right, so we've just finished our first stitch. We tied our 2 ends together down in the back there, and we've stuffed them down in there. We're gonna do another single crochet. Once again, we're on 13. We had 2 single crochets and then an invisible decrease. So next up we have an invisible decrease. As you remember, our invisible decrease is to take the front loop only of the 2 stitches that we're going to crochet together, both front loops of those 2 stitches. And we're gonna pull our yarn through those 2, and then we've got 2 on our hook, and we're gonna pull through those 2. Next up we have 4 single crochets. We start our parentheses things where we repeat this 5 times next. So we have 4 single crochets and then a decrease. Here's 1 single crochet, 2, 3, and 4. Next up is our invisible decrease. So we take the front loops of both stitches that we're crocheting together onto our hook, pull through those 2, and then pull through the stitch there. Next we have 4 single crochets. Here's 1, 2, 3, and 4. And now we have a decrease. So front loops only of the 2 stitches we're going to crochet together onto our hook and then pull through again. 4 stitches next. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Decreases next, so we're going to pick up the 2 stitches that we want to crochet together, the front loops of those, there we go, and 4 stitches. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Decrease, front loops of the 2 stitches we're going together, and pull through. 4 single crochets. 1, 2, 3, whoops, 3, and 4, and a decrease. And we will go ahead and finish off with the final 2 single crochets to get us back to the beginning of this round. Okay. All right, next up we have 3 single crochets and a decrease 6 times to give us 24 stitches. Take our stitch marker out. Go ahead and start with the 1 single crochet and replace our stitch marker. That's 1, 2, 3, and a decrease. And then 1, 2, 3, and a decrease. 1, 2, 3, and a decrease. 1, 2, 3, decrease. 1, 2, 3, decrease. Sorry about the dog. And last of our 6 sets, 1, 2, 3, and our last 2 stitches are decreased together. All right, next up, decrease 2 single crochets 6 times for a total of 18. You'll notice our turtle has really taken good shape here. Isn't he cute? All right, take out our stitch marker. We start this round with a decrease. So we go ahead and put that 2 stitches, front loops of the 2 that we're going to stitch together, and single crochet them together. And go ahead and close it. And then 2 single crochets in the next 2 stitches. Well, 1 single crochet in the next 2 stitches. So 1, 2. Next up we have a decrease. Shh. Decrease. 1 and 2. Decrease. And 1, 2. Next is a decrease. And 2. 1 and 2. More yarn. Next is a decrease. 1, 2, and I believe this is the last of our 6. Yep, we've got 4 stitches left, so we're going to do a decrease. And 1, 2. All right. Next instruction is to stuff. So we want to make sure that our character has some good backbone in him. Again, I like to kind of fluff my stuffing just to make sure that it doesn't. So what happens sometimes if you don't fluff it, it kind of bunches up into weird places. Whereas if you kind of take it and separate it out, it has a tendency to just lay in the character a little bit better, in my opinion. So I will get a good chunk in there, and then what I'll do is kind of push it off kind of to the sides. By the way, I'm gonna go ahead and take all this scrap yarn that I had left over from the head and the legs and stuff, and I'm gonna actually just stick it all in there. Give it a little bit of extra stuffing that way, and I'm not wasting those ends either. So I'm just gonna go ahead and stuff it in there. Kind of like to scoop it around the edge, make sure it's nice and poofy on that side, and go ahead and keep stuffing. Make sure you have your starting your loop that your working loop nice and big, so you don't have to worry about potentially losing that loop. All right. There is no necessarily right or wrong way as far as how much stuffing is going in, but depending on the size of your stitches, you also are going to want to make sure that it's not so stuffed that you've got these huge holes in there. That sometimes can happen. And so there are different ways of crocheting that will help you keep your stitches nice and tight so that you don't have to worry so much about that. But, you know, as a beginner especially, you're probably going to have some pretty loose stitches. So you may not want to stuff it so much. That you can see I actually didn't do a great job keeping my stitches really tight. So now I've got some holes here. That's okay because it's white. Now I could take this green out of there because that's kind of nasty looking. If I'm stuffing white with white, then it's not quite so bad, but that green is kind of causing a little bit of problem there. So I may go ahead and take those back out, and I'll stuff those pieces. Yeah, that's good. I'll stuff those pieces on the top where the green is instead. All right, so once I've got the back so it feels kind of stuffed, that's really probably about good right there, that amount of stuffing. I've got quite a bit left, but that's okay. I'm going to make sure that my stuffing down here on the belly part is pushed in real well, because I don't want to have to fight it too much as I'm finishing up. Now keep in mind that this is ultimately going to be almost flat. It's really going to be a little rounded, but it's going to be almost flat. We can always add more stuffing. It's harder to take it out at the end there, although you can do it. But I'm going to go ahead and leave it kind of where it's at. I'm going to go ahead and stick those pieces back in there. All right. So then our next instruction is single crochet, decrease 6 times for a total of 12 stitches. Take my stitch marker out. And so we go single crochet, place the stitch marker back. Once we're done with that, and then decrease 6 times. Remember, as you're crocheting with the stuffing in there, you want to try to minimize the amount of stuffing you're picking up with your hook as you're doing that single crochet. Not too much of an issue with your decrease because you're only working in those front loops, but that single crochet is one that you're going to want to be able to double check. Decrease, single decrease. So you don't want to pick up any of that stuffing, so make sure you hold it down as you go around, so it's out of the way of your hook. So we are down to the last technical round that we've got. We have one more thing that we have to do to close it up nice and neatly, but this last set is going to be a 6 decrease. So you're going to decrease 6 times all the way around. So again, take out your piece here, because those out of the way. Here's your last opportunity for the most part to stuff it. So if you feel like you need a little more stuffing in that belly, you can do so at this point in time, or you feel like you need to take some out, you can do that too. I'm gonna put a little bit more in just to have it a little tighter. All right. You might be able to get them in after this, but it's gonna be pretty tough. So decreasing all the way around, but we want to put our stitch marker back in. So we're going to start with one decrease and place our stitch marker. One thing I will tell you, decreasing can cause holes, pretty big holes in fact. I tend to do my decreases pretty light, not tight, because that kind of makes them fluff out a little bit better and makes it so that it's not quite so many holes. However, even sometimes that's going to give you some kind of nasty holes in the back here. So this is the part that you want to be a little bit careful. Go a little slow. Make sure you're making neat stitches, not pulling too tightly as you go, so that your stitches have room to puff out a little bit if needed to cover up those holes that are kind of being created. There are again some options to help with that, including yarning under instead of yarning over. There's a hole, I mostly yarn under, which is not what I'm doing here. I'm yarning over, but that can help a lot as well. So, all right. Last of my 6 decreases. All right, next up, we're going to, we want a little bit of a tail on this. We don't want to cut this too short because we need to be able to close up this hole that's here. It's super easy to do, but we want to have enough yarn to be able to do that without having to fight it. So I usually do, you know, a pretty good chunk there. Cut that off. Again, we're going to fasten off by pulling that through. And then I just want to show you where I've got my six stitches. So counting backwards, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay. We are now going to use our darning needle to close up that hole. So thread your needle with your yarn. And the way that we do this is we go under the front loop into the center of the thing without picking up that back loop. So we're just going under the front loop all the way around. So that was 1. I count as I do this because I actually want 7 stitches in this. So it's a little weird. 2, 3, whoop, don't get it caught around your leg. 3. Okay, now I've done 3. I can go ahead and pull this a little bit. You don't have to, you can wait until you're out at the end, but this helps make sure that I've got it tight enough as I go to. This is 4, 5, again with it wrapped around the leg. 5 and 6. This brings me back to my first stitch. Now there's this kind of weird looking stitch that's right here. We want to also have that one closed in. So we're going to actually go under that front loop of that one as well. So that's actually 7 around, but it helps keep it closed nicely as we do this. Just like the magic loop, we get to pull this tight and it makes it a nice little circle there. All right, so you can kind of see that little circle this way. how it's pulled it nicely, and it's kind of got a nice little circle there. Okay. So once that's closed pretty tight, then what you're gonna do is weave in this end. And again, the best practice is to kind of go under and over some stitches, do a little bit of back and forth so that you don't have to worry about this thing coming out. Now you've got some stuffing in there. So it does make it a little bit more difficult sometimes with the stuffing in there to get it to go through well. So you want to try to stay on top of the stuffing rather than inside the stuffing. Sorry, kicked it. This is where it becomes a little bit difficult because it's so so tight. I a lot of times keep a pair of pliers nearby so that when I'm doing this, I can pull that needle through with the pliers and I don't have to use my teeth like I keep doing. Not a good idea, not a good practice. All right, a few more. And we will be finished up. Okay, I've got some pretty good stitches through there. Now I can just clean up. If I had some holes here, one of the things that I sometimes do is I will take my yarn and I'll just kind of stitch through some of those holes. So maybe this hole right here is a little too big for my taste. I'm just gonna take and cover it up a little bit with this yarn. The cool thing about it is it's just, it just kind of covers it and you don't have to worry too much about whether or not it looks good or not. So I've got a little bit of fuzz coming through. This is stuffing. This is why you don't want to pick up the stuffing because then it starts showing through, especially if it's white. All right, once we've got it done, you can pull it kind of tight so that you've got a little bit to work with there. Cut it right there. Make sure you're not cutting the character. And you are all finished. Look at how cute he is. And I really love this little turtle. I think he's super cute. So there you go. Thanks, you guys. I hope it was a helpful video and that you are going to be successful. Feel free to reach out and let me know if you have questions or are having problems. I'm happy to help anybody that might need some help. Thank you.